Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Wernick, and I'm with my partner and colleague, Rabbi Friar Bodzin.
Hello, everyone.
We are two of the rabbis, part of a really dynamic spiritual leadership team at Beth Tzedec congregation in Toronto, Ontario. We are happy to be joining our colleagues from our rabbinical assembly around the world in creating this resource for Tikkun Leil Shavuot, for the all-night study session of Shavuot, the reenactment of our receiving of Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai.
This is a very different Shavuot for a lot of us. Personally, for the last 10 years, I was in Queens, New York, and my prior congregation, even though it was small, it stayed up all night long, learning all night long until an early morning Hashkama Minyan. Since we cannot gather in groups anymore, we're trying this out, and we're so honored to be a part of our RA's approach to Shavuot this year.
And we hope that you'll find all of the resources that our colleagues create for this study session to be inspiring, not only today, but every day. May your Torah be full, may it be sweet, may it inspire us all to righteous living, and may this pandemic end bimheira v'yameinu, quickly within our days. We extend our best wishes and our prayers for refuah shlema, of course, to everyone who may be impacted and whose health is ailing as a result of this pandemic. And we also extend our bracha and our thanks to all the medical personnel who are working so hard to keep us safe and to keep people healthy and alive during this crisis, as well as to all of the essential personnel who are working to keep our food supply lines and other essential services running. Thank you for that. We dedicate this Torah to each of you.
Amen. And while we actually only live about a kilometer away from each other, we are coming to you from our home offices that we quickly made in the middle of March once we realized that we needed to start working from home.
Let's start with a text. I'm going to share our screen. You can see that Rabbi Friar Bodzin and I put together a couple of texts that we thought were really relevant for this moment. And we're going to focus on these texts and talk about the really wonderful ways in which we're seeing them experienced and brought to life within our community in the Greater Toronto area, as well as in many other communities that we're watching, as you are, online, as people bring these ancient values to life in this circumstance. Rabbi, you want to take us through the first one, perhaps?
Sure. Psalm 30 is a psalm that we recite every single day, and we recite it with a little bit of extra emotion. We stand up for it. And when we get to the end, one of the last verses, we read these words, Hafachta misbadi lemacholi. You turned my lament into dancing. And this verse, more than any other pasuk, more than any other words during morning tefillah, has really resonated with me since we've been in isolation. But not only that, it has resonated in different ways. When we were first sent home, I really felt like we were in this lament. We were in this place of sadness. We didn't know anything. We didn't know how medical professionals were taking care of us. We didn't know what essential workers were able to do. And I just saw it as hopeful that one day, maybe we'll be able to dance again. If the psalmist, whether we believe it was King David or someone else, would be able to get out of this lament with God's help and get to a place of dancing, well then, we could too. As the weeks have progressed, sometimes I see the chesed in the world, and it actually does make me feel like dancing. I feel so blessed to be part of the Toronto Jewish community, which I've always known has been a strong, tight-knit Jewish community, a Zionist community, and a community that really takes tradition seriously. But I never saw the chesed to the extent that I've seen it in these last few months. Steve?
I would just add to that a couple of thoughts. One is that our colleague Yaakov Fruchter, who's the Director of Community Building and Spiritual Engagement at Beth Tzedec, created a wonderful Omer Chesed chart, so that every day of the Omer is paired with a suggestion for chesed that we can accomplish even isolated in our homes. We're recording this on Mother's Day on Sunday, May 10th, and Friday, Erev Shabbat, the chesed that Yaakov suggested was to do a spontaneous dance party. So I just remember on Friday morning leading our Shachrit minyan and sharing that with everybody and turning on one of the tunes on my Spotify and watching all of our minyan people, about 30 such boxes, like, everybody just start dancing. There's something about dancing that really does express a sense of simcha, of joy. And simcha, of course, is not just happiness, right? Happiness is something that's fleeting. It's something that we always have to be chasing after, as in the American Constitution. You have to pursue happiness. And then when you get it, it's as if it slips away and you have to go chasing after it again. But simcha is that joy that comes bifnim. It's part of the body, it's part of the soul, it's the meshing of body, soul, and intellect together. And being isolated in this way, I'm blessed that I have 4/5 of my family together within our household. And though there are times when it's like, the boundaries between home, school, and work can be really frustrating. The reality is that we've hardly ever spent this type of time together. And the reconnection, the appreciation of the talents and the skills, the love that we have for each other. And then even beyond that, when you observe the chesed that a community such as ours is performing for others, the chesed that you see in the general community that we'll talk about in a few moments in the Greater Toronto area, the chesed that you see in so many different corners of our world, there are moments when that lament really does turn into dancing, and we do really find this deep simcha, this joy that just comes from inside and reminds us of the capacity of human beings for
Absolutely.
profound chesed.
Absolutely. I also see it in a second way, which is you can't just sit home and cry all day long. You need to get out for your own mental health. And unless it's really, really bad weather, I've been walking every day since at least Pesach. I've been trying to hit at least 10K every day, which thank God I've made it for. And every time I'm out, I see members of our congregation. And it's just such a bracha that is to see that other people are actually doing the same thing. They're taking care of their mental health. They're getting their energy out. They're getting those endorphins going. And so there's ways of dealing with the sadness and with the isolation. One of those is getting out. If you can't be socially distanced, then of course wear a mask. We take a look at the second, yeah.
So we'll go on to the second text that Rabbi Friar Bodzin and I thought of in preparing for this session. Da'aga belev ish yashchena v'davar tov yisamchena. This is a verse, of course, that speaks directly to anxiety. If there's anxiety in a person's mind, then that person should seek to quash it and turn it into joy and with the good word. This is one of the things I remember at the very beginning of this crisis. We asked Leanne Matlow, who's an expert of mental health, who's part of the advisory committee of our Center for Spiritual Well-Being, to lead a session on how do you cope when you're cooped up. And one of the things that she talked about is that one is that, like, we're going to be anxious. We have to name that anxiety. We have to recognize it. But the way to quash it is not to ignore it or to push it down.
Right.
The way to quash it is to take it and to turn it to something that we can control. The main trigger for anxiety in these circumstances is uncertainty. We didn't know, we still don't know how long we're going to be in isolation and quarantine. We still don't fully understand what the phased return to to civic society and to the economy is going to look like. There's still uncertainty about all sorts of elements of the science of this virus and how it works, how it gets passed, how people become immune, if there's going to be a vaccine, when there's going to be a vaccine, will there be a second wave? There's so much that is unknown that it can at times be overwhelming, and it just feels like it's coming down on you in anxiety. But the most important thing that you can do to quash the anxiety is to focus on what you can control. You can control taking a daily walk. You can control setting times by which you're going to work. You can control exercise. You can control to take up a new hobby, or to clean that closet that you've been wanting to do for 6 months. You can control picking up the phone and talking to friends and family. You can control setting Zoom families. It's like my family's all over the world. I have family in New York. I'm here in Canada. I have a daughter in Israel, in Pennsylvania, DC. We've never thought before to have like a weekly Zoom call. We've always talked one-on-one or so forth, but now for the last 6 weeks, we've been meeting weekly on Zoom, and it's been wonderful. And we can control that, and we make that time sacred as Shabbat or Yom Tov, and we don't miss it, and we're all there, and we share that. And that's also with the good word, right? With Davar Tov, the good words that we share with each other to support each other, to lift ourselves up when we're feeling down. And it's really a powerful, powerful way of dealing with anxiety. And I've a long time ago stopped being surprised by the constant relevancy and wisdom of our tradition that, millennia,
That's there.
right? Millennia ago, the writer of the Psalms and of Proverbs, they understood these truths that continue to be true even to our own day.
Right. Right. And there's so much anxiety. We are rabbis at a very extra large synagogue, and we have so many simchas down the road that we don't know what they're going to look like. And we can't say for sure, well, let's just change it and have it in September if it's supposed to be next week. And so we had a group together of upcoming B'nai Mitzvah because we wanted to give them that chance to talk about it. We wanted to give them a good word. We wanted to let them know that they were being heard. If you scroll down to the next text, which is the text in Talmud from Yoma on page 75a, it tries to understand what the Hebrew word, back up a little, it's fine, yashchena means. One rabbi says, if you have anxiety, just like get rid of it, force it out there. But the other rabbi says you should talk to people and talk about your concerns. And we have found that has been an enduring way to deal with the reality of right now for this current pause that we're in from what we once knew. There's just a lot of talking going on in the city of Toronto, but more than that, there is so much going on in our virtual world and in our cyber worlds as well.
And it's also, getting back to the point we said before, is the wisdom that continues to be true in our own day. Mental health experts, especially those who deal with trauma, tell us that the more a person who has been victimized by a trauma can tell and retell their story, the more resilient they become, because that talking about it helps to frame it, to categorize it, to compartmentalize it, and to put it in a place where it's no longer weighing down on them, but actually becomes part of the way in which they pack their baggage moving forward. It's not like one should ever, we all carry baggage, and those bags are heavier or lighter depending upon our own experience. The key is not to put the bag away. Those bags are always with us. It's how do you arrange them? How do you organize them? And how do you make them light enough that you can carry them and not feel burdened by them all the time?
Right.
And here in this Gemara, we see that, plain as day. It's important to talk about it. It's important to share. And it's important to constantly do that. It's not a one-off. It's not just
Right.
talking to one person. What are some of the ways, Rabbi Friar Bodzin, that we're experiencing that in our community, and especially in the work that you're doing, leading our Center for Spiritual Well-Being?
So I'm just thinking to what last week was for me. On one night, we had this bar mitzvah group that I spoke about where we let the kids know that we're here for them and we hear them. And we had that same person, Leanne Matlow, who is the brains behind Mental Health Empowerment Day here in Toronto and also a member of our congregation. She had a whole PowerPoint ready for them, validating any feelings that they might have, but to put them in together.
And
We
what did we
also
call that group, by the way? That's a very clever name, I think.
We called them Bard Mitzvah, Barred. We have the kids in a competition right now to design a logo. I mean, we're going to give them a hoodie to let them know, we care about them. This isn't just a one-off. We're going to spend the time to invest in them because we care that whatever the bar mitzvah was that they thought was happening or bat mitzvah that they thought is probably not. We don't want to leave it at that. We're here. Again, lots of phone calls, lots of emails about that. We also had, which was a privilege. We had our first bereavement group for people that have suffered loss during COVID, where funerals were not what they expected. There was no shiva. They can't have minyanim in the house. And we had this group, unfortunately it's getting bigger, but nearly all of them have since reached out to me and said, Rabbi, was it a one-off or can we do this ongoing? And so we're going to be doing this every other week. And we have a LCSW, RSW, MSW. Her name is Debbie Berlin, and she's the co-founder of Canada's first freestanding Jewish hospice, who's facilitating that for us. Another group we have is a group that people don't think of so often. It's 40-somethings, parents of teens and tweens. Because this is not a group that the Jewish community usually pays much attention to. There's an assumption that they have it all going. And this group met this week also to be able to share what they're going through, working from home with their kids at home. Some kids are in day school and they're getting educated during the day and lots of Zoom, and some kids aren't. And it was such a beautiful experience to bring these folks together who have been meeting every 6 weeks or so since October. And they know each other now. They're a small group as part of our small groups initiative. And it was just really powerful to get together, B, have a drink without our kids for a while on our couches, and C, share and get some ideas from each other. We also this week, it was a long week, we did a healing service. And then we had our gratitude circle where people took the time on a Thursday night to come online and to share what they were grateful for. The first time we did it, it was okay. But this time people kept talking and talking and talking, and you could feel a different environment, if I can say, even though we weren't in the same space, but I felt lighter being part of that. When you express gratitude, it really helps your own well-being. And these are just some of the things that we've been doing recently to be able to talk to others about their concerns.
And I would add to that is we're really working hard that with all of our group settings to do a check-in, to give people an opportunity to share a gratitude. That's another technique by which we can take this crisis and learn the skills for resiliency and for coping. And it just, again, it's back to the Proverbs, which the Yoma is riffing on. It's that v'davar tov yisamchena.
Right?
It's a good word. It's a good word that turns this anxiety into joy. It's not so much that it turns the anxiety into joy, but it reminds us that even within this circumstance, we can have joy. We can have gratitude.
And we can. Joy can be as simple as ordering Shabbat dinner. Just having that done for you, one less thing to sit down with that ease. So all the other stress that you're doing during the week, you don't have that extra stress of, oh my God, I need to get Shabbat dinner on the table. We're so grateful that our caterer is actually making Shabbat dinners every week.
I wanted to mention is like you talked about our congregation being a rather large community. We have 2,300 households and about 5,000 people that are associated with Beth Tzedec here in Toronto. One of the things that we did right when this began was we recruited over 100 volunteers, and we started to call every household, beginning with the most vulnerable of our community. And we've been ensuring that people have food, they have access to food, that people are lonely. We're calling them on a regular basis. We had one case of homelessness that we had to deal with. We have people like everybody else all throughout the world that are now experiencing job loss or underemployment. And on the other end of it, people that are dual working households that have no childcare, and whose young kids are getting underfoot as they're working. And it's just been tremendous, the response of just calling out and calling people and asking if they're okay. And the volunteers find that meaningful. The congregation finds that meaningful, and we know that our colleagues all around the world are doing the same thing. And it's just it's this too is we've all known that we've needed to do this anyway.
Yeah.
But the realities of the systems that we've been in that have distracted us from actually doing it have gotten in the way. But then this is one of the benefits or opportunities that come from a crisis, is this type of engagement, which a place like Tzedec has not experienced in a long time, not because of any lack of goodwill, but just because of what's in front of you gets in front of you, and the priorities that you'd like to do seem to just move further and further and further to back burners. And
Right.
this has changed that. The small groups, though, becomes an important initiative for us and has been for the last year. A small groups initiative, for people that don't know, it really comes out of the evangelical church community. Rick Warren, who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life and The Purpose-Driven Church, is one of the founders of a small group strategy. Dr. Ron Wolfson and his colleagues who've written relational Judaism books are the Judaicizing of this process. And we've been, the challenge that we've always had is that how do you take a very supersized
Extra large.
community and turn it into meaningful, smaller caring groups. And
Right.
not only we've been on this journey for the last 2 years, but certainly now we see a need for those small groups, not only online, but when we are able to be physically present in our lives again as well. And we have, I think, over 20 small groups already that are forming, and we just started the initiative to go on a listening tour in order to find out what are the things that people really want and need, and that they're willing to commit to in order to be partners in bringing about for reality. So that's really exciting, and it's another way in which we see these 3 texts come to life within our community.
Is it okay if we pivot a little? We're so grateful that we were asked to speak representing Beth Tzedec, which is a flagship synagogue and also such an important institution in Toronto. But I want us to now go to the macro, to the city level, if that's okay. So I grew up
it's on my note, Rabbi.
Okay, good. And that's how we work well together. So I grew up in Toronto, and I always knew that Toronto was amazing and that the community was super, and lots of good families and whatnot, and that UJA was super, but I never fully was able to grasp what the city is able to do until this happened. And we want to point at a few different initiatives that are taking place. So the first one, we'll have to, if you can move over to your other screen over there, is the formation of an unbelievable group that everyone we know is a part of because it has 9,000 members. It's called Kavod 19, the Toronto Jewish Community Response to COVID-19. I think it has more than 9,000 members at this point. And it was founded by some people from Beth Tzedec, which is pretty exciting. And it has become one of the Facebook groups that I never delete and that I always look at because there's always some wisdom there. Information from, I have a grandparent at this particular Jewish retirement hall. Oh no, okay, get rid of that. Hey, Craig Taubman. To other examples of where can I get kosher takeout, to before Pesach, everything was there possible, to I'm looking for a bike that I can't go to a store, you name it. Where can I find a Friday night service? Where can I find a Shabbat morning service? What are the most recent rules on cemeteries? It is such a wonderful resource.
And you know, it's also been the place in which the community has done some serious discussions with some of the medical leaders of the community, talking about the impact of the virus on the community. What are the conditions by which we're going to start seeing a phase return to physical engagements, and also, in some ways, scarily, the differences between the way in which the Jewish community has been impacted by the virus as opposed to the larger community. For example, one of the things that I learned on May 4th, the page hosted a dialogue with three doctors.
It's a Jewish task force that's put
Jewish
together,
force,
actually. It's
right.
a big task force of lots of wonderful doctors. I
And
can't recall the name right now.
And there's, you know, unfortunately, Jews have been more likely to get COVID than the larger community. And the reason for that is that the average Ontarian has 12 regular contacts. The average Jewish Ontarian has over 100.
120, I believe the number
120 was the number. It gets skewed a little bit, you know, by the Jewish community when you think about the more observant and the more engaged in synagogue life a person is, the larger the number of regular social contacts that a person is going to have. But on average, it's 10 times bigger, which was, on the one hand, it's like, wow, think about how socially engaged the Jewish community is with each other in Ontario. On the other hand, it's like, you know, now, you know, all the questions that we're asking about when is it safe to come back to synagogue and so forth and so on are all really impacted by that data as well. It's interesting and a little frightening at the same time, but also, you know, from the Kavod, right? The pun on COVID, the Kavod, the respect, the weight of this.
Maybe we can unshare screen first.
Yeah, I think we'll go back to the text. People don't need to see my Facebook page.
Yeah. Okay.
The weight of this also gets expressed in the chesed that so many people are doing. So, for example, one of our members, who has the title, this is the greatest title. One of our members is known as the Mensch of St. Clair West.
I love it.
And Julian is his first name. And what he's doing has just been amazing. He's been engaging thousands of people within the neighborhood to support local restaurants and stores and in the small mom and pop kind of shops, either through ordering for delivery or pickup, encouraging gift cards, and so forth. And even more importantly, he's been encouraging the restaurants and people to buy through the restaurants as well as grocery stores. And if there's food that is expiring and they would otherwise need to dispose of it, he's been encouraging them to donate that food to the St. Michael's food pantry.
And let me just explain what he's doing a little bit more. So most people are staying home, right? They're not leaving their houses. They're not walking on the main street if they're walking anywhere. They'll walk on side streets. They'll walk on paths, which thankfully we have many, or trails. But Julian is actually going out on the main street to let us know what's happening, to let us know if there's a pop-up for just one day, so that we'll know, so that we can support these organizations, or not these organizations, so that we can support these restaurants and these stores, so that we don't need to go out maybe in harm's way just to check things out, because he's doing it for us, which is really, really helpful. And as a kid at home, you know, like it's not like he has all the time in the world either, like so many of us with all of our stresses.
And so he's taking the anxiety and he's turning it into joy, into a good word. And more than that, the chesed that he's doing is that the St. Michael's food pantry, you know, they never have enough food for the need that you have in normal times. And there's still not enough food for the need that we have even in these times. But the amazing thing is that there is still a lot of people that are getting fed that otherwise would not have been fed if it weren't for Julian and other people's actions in order to make that happen. He really is the Mensch of St. Clair's West.
Right.
And one of the major food banks of the city is benefiting from his davar tov, which, you know, the word davar doesn't have to be a word. Davar could also be a thing, right? So daga belev ish yashchena, if there's anxiety in a person's mind, in the person's heart, the davar tov, a good thing, yisamchena, a good thing turns it into joy.
Absolutely.
Right? A good act, a good chesed turns into joy. And he's not the only one. We sponsor in the GTA, Beth Tzedec does this with Beth Shalom, which is one of the conservative synagogues near us. We have a partnership with a local NGA called Out of the Cold, which during 12 weeks of the winter, one day a week, we host about 200 people for dinner and for breakfast, and we sleep about 70 people that are homeless. During this pandemic, most of the homeless shelters have closed down.
Right. And just we literally provide shelter, but also literally shelter, food, and clothing, and conversation. It's a really powerful experience that the entire Jewish community gets involved in. And so many people from our Beth Tzedec community are volunteers.
And I would say the other thing that we do with this is advocacy.
Yeah.
We have a really strong relationship with the city council and with the mayor's office as a result of this, and the leaders of Out of the Cold from both our synagogue and from Beth Shalom have been advocating. We've been amongst the leadership of the homeless advocates, been advocating same thing, turning anxiety into davar tov. Not yet accomplished as much as we want or need to accomplish, but working really hard to find solutions. Right. To this problem of how do you care for a homeless community, and at the same time flatten the curve of the virus, not only for them to be sick, but even more so for them, if they happen to be carriers, to not be carrying it to other people and infecting others with it.
All right, so let's share a roundabout way of getting back there. So as we mentioned, we're filming this on Mother's Day, and some unbelievable lay leaders and volunteers in our congregation had a great idea for Mother's Day that's been going on for years and years and years, a beautiful tea that's been done for women, and we can't get together this year. And I don't know, Zoom tea might not have been the option. And so what these volunteers did, and these lay leaders, they created a fundraiser for Out of the Cold. I actually have the same flowers, but I would have to leave to get them. We worked with small businesses, a flower shop, and also a caterer. And apparently thousands of dollars was raised for Out of the Cold. I have 2 in my home because the men's club at Beth Tzedec got for all the women of the shul, and my daughter got for me. And I have some that I'm going to be driving up to my mother's as I drop it off at her front door and not walk in because, you know, she's over 7.
Yeah. And it was also, it's like, you know, we had this annual program, the Chai Tea event, which would typically bring in 200 to 300 people, and they would have a really lovely program. But they decided instead to turn Mother's Day into an opportunity for tzedakah.
Hafachta misbedila macholi.
Well, I'll put that back up too. That's right. They turned it on its head.
Yeah.
They turned the anxiety, the lament into joy. And in the process, as you said, not only provided thousands of dollars of business for our Apex Catering, but also for Ken's Flower Shop, which is one of the local flower shops here, and netted $5,000 for Out of the Cold.
And made sure that hundreds of us didn't have to go to stores to get gifts for Mother's Day. And who doesn't like flowers? I like them.
And so it's just really, when we think about what Shavuot is about, Shavuot is about of course, it's about the barley harvest. It's about, but in rabbinic literature, it's Man Matan Tortenu. It's the time of the giving of Torah, and the language there is really important. It's matan. It's not natan. It's not past tense. It's in the present tense. It's the ongoing. We believe in a continuous revelation, that every time Jews study Torah, it's as Professor Lieberman, Alav Shalom from JTS used to say, is when I pray to God, I talk to God, but when I study Torah, God talks to me. When we study Torah, and if we really open ourselves up to hearing what it is that God expects of us, what God expects of us are these kinds of acts of chesed, of the receiving of Torah, the giving of Torah, is about impacting and refining the human condition, so that we have shleimut, that coalescence of well-being, of mind, of body, and of spirit, of soul.
And also throughout the book of Ruth, all we see is chesed. We just see so many acts of chesed between Ruth and Naomi, and Ruth and Boaz. In so many ways, the essence of the values found in our Torah is chesed. I coined a new term during this isolation called chesed crying. I used to cry every day. I've kind of stopped a little. Yesterday I didn't cry at all, thank God. But I've been able to differentiate between sad, pain, and anger crying and chesed crying. Chesed crying is when you see the good around you and you just can't stop the tears. I was working out the other day to Some Good News on YouTube. And it was the episode where...
Make sure everybody knows what Some Good News is.
It's a show on YouTube with John Krasinski, who is from The Office, and that's the other show on Netflix called?
It's on Amazon Prime. It's Jack Ryan.
I don't really
Tom
watch
Clancy.
TV.
It's a Tom Clancy. Come on, Rabbi.
I don't watch
It's
TV.
Tom Clancy. He's Tom Clancy's key character.
Anyways, he has this show. It's on YouTube. There's every week. And he just shows good news in the world, like good acts of chesed. He doesn't call it chesed. Like he had the cast of Hamilton sing Hamilton songs for a little kid who loved Hamilton. He created a prom for kids who weren't having prom with the Jonas Brothers and other people I don't know about. And then he also had a graduation episode with 4 different speakers: Malala, Oprah, Jon Stewart, and Steven Spielberg. And they were just giving life messages to these graduating seniors. And I'm bawling my eyes out listening to them. Steven Spielberg, he had 2 pieces of unbelievable wisdom. And I wrote them down, so I watched it twice. One of them was, imagination and innovation will get us all to the other side. And I think all of us need to reimagine what our synagogues are going to look like for the future, because it's not going to be the same as it was. And he also said that during a time of huge loss, it's also a chance to dream big about our futures together. And I think what we're doing here, creating this online Tikkun Leil Shavuot, this is a way that we're dreaming big about our future together.
And I also would say that this is the essence of what it means to be a Jewish person. Right, we're part of a great people with a very long, great tradition that have experienced the highest highs of the world and the lowest lows of the world as well. And yet we're still here because our tradition is man matan Toratenu. It's an ongoing encounter with the divine. It's always been looking to turn our anxiety into joy and to turn our joy into even greater joy. And what's really important is to know that we're not alone. We're never alone. We always have each other, and we always, God willing, feel God's presence walking with us as well. And so I think that's really a good place for both of us to say, first of all, Chag Sameach, to say Chag Sameach, to thank our colleagues from our rabbinical assembly for its leadership at this time and for keeping us feeling connected and sane as we also work hard to pastor to our communities. And again, Mehalev, to thank all the medical professionals and all the frontline essential workers for the work that they're doing. May you stay Uflat Nefesh, Uflat Guf. May you be healed. May you continue to heal, and may you be strengthened by our enduring appreciation for the work that you do every day.
Amen.
I think Amen is the answer.
I miss you, Steve.
I miss you too, Robyn. God willing, I'll see you soon.
One day.
One day. Thank you, everyone, and Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.